In the last month, we have continually been watching more film,
Yes,
looking at some analytics,
that's right.
right? Not too much, because the film is what we like the most. But we have an update with some of our rankings, okay? We want to tell you players that we have moved up and players that we have moved down
Correct.
in the last month for the rookies of the 2022 NFL Draft. Obviously, we're talking from a dynasty football perspective. We're going to give you one player each. We're going to give reasons as to why we've moved them up or why we have moved them down. And if you have access to our Patreon, Close Friends Plus and above, you can check that link out in the description. Then
That's
you'll be
right.
able to see this. It's constantly being updated over there as well with rookie profiles. I'm going to give you my first player that has gone up in my ranking.
Okay.
All right. And that is George Pickens.
Mr. Pick.
I say it every time I talk about George Pickens, but Pablo Picasso was born to paint. What was George Pickens born to do? Play the wide receiver position. This is what he was born to do. He was my wide receiver 4. I moved him up to my wide receiver 2. He is my wide receiver 2 in this class. And I looked back on my notes when we were scouting him, when we were looking at his film originally,
Right.
and this was back in December. And I said to myself, will likely end up being a top 3 wide receiver for me if I see what I need to see from the combine, which we will talk about the combine here in a second. But if I could describe George Pickens in one word, it's fluid. I've said this before, but I think he's the most fluid, natural wide receiver in this class. It's like, if you have an older car, you'll probably understand this a little bit more, but it's like going to get an oil change. And your older car is really struggling on that old oil, but
Right.
as soon as you pull off the lot with that new oil change, that is what it's like watching George Pickens. So smooth. You can feel the difference. He's just different. Confident in his movements, in his routes. As a route runner, as a catcher, after the catch, he's just a very, very smooth player. And by the way, who had the best defense in college football last year? Georgia, without a doubt. I mean, some people are saying that this is the best defense in college football history. They're comparing it to the LSU offense as far as like, this could be the best college football defense we've ever seen.
Right.
And who spent the past 3 years lined up against these guys learning? That was George Pickens, just in case you're wondering. Number 2, I want to address, because I announced this on a stream and there was a lot of questions. So I want to address both in our Discord community, on other platforms,
Okay.
the most common questions that I have received about this, okay? And maybe you're sitting there thinking about some of these. Number 1, are you worried about his injury? I've been asked that. ACLs are becoming easier and easier to recover from. Let's look
Right.
at wide receivers who have returned to elite form after an ACL tear. How about Keenan Allen? How about Jordy Nelson, Allen Robinson? And what about Cooper Kupp? Okay, who just had what some would consider the best wide receiver season, overall complete season ever. Number 1 in fantasy by a mile. I mean, he is only 2 years removed from an ACL. Let's not forget about that. That wasn't all that long ago.
Right.
Another question that I keep hearing is, are you worried about his lack of production? And to be honest, when we take this into context, I don't fully understand that question. In 2019, he was very productive. Go look at his 2019, his first season. In 2020, it was a COVID year. There was up and down quarterback play. I mean, I think their most successful quarterback there threw about 1,200 yards. I mean, it was an up and down year, and he only played 8 games. But if you want to look at his 2020 form, just check out the bowl game that they had that year versus Cincinnati, where he was an absolute monster. I mean, he was the reason they won that game. And then obviously last year in 2021, he tore his ACL. So no, I'm not worried about the lack of production because I don't understand that question. And the last one that I've heard is, aren't you worried about his hand size? All right, so we go into the combine. Now, my question to everyone is, all right, so are we going to look at hand size or are we going to look at film? Because at the end of the day, if hand size is a problem, he did measure in a little bit small at the combine with his hand size. But
Okay.
why would we be worried about that? Let's really, really think about that. Why would we be worried about his hand size more than his film? Well, are we seeing a history of drop issues for George Pickens? Do we see that in his game? Is there any analytics to back that the hands are an issue? Well, let's look at some of the career drop rates from this 2022 class. And I have tiered this. By the way, shout out to the guys from PFF. I'm going to use a couple of their images here on the screen. Let's look at the bad tier. It's on the bottom of your screen. That's Christian Watson at 12.7%. That is his career drop rate at 12.7%.
Right.
All right. Let's look at the average tier. You got Alec Pierce, Garrett Wilson, Justin Ross, Treylon Burks, Jamison Williams, and Jalen Tolbert, all around 6 to 8%. And then the good, you got Olave, Jahan Dotson, and Drake London, who are all around 4 to 5%. Then you have the elite in this class, as far as they are the most secure catchers. You have Sky Moore at 3.3%, and then George Pickens at 2.1%. Again, if we're looking at Christian Watson at the bottom of that list at 12.7%, that's his career drop rate. A lot of people are talking, well, he didn't get a bunch of targets. Well, yeah, but what did he do with the targets? And if we want to look at analytics, first off, film is the biggest thing I look at. But if we want to look at analytics, then yes, it is not a problem whatsoever for George Pickens, his hand size. In fact, he is at the top of the class. And let's compare him to last year's class, why don't we? Okay. How about Rashad Bateman, 7.7%. Jamar Chase, 5.7%. Jalen Waddle, 5.3%. And then Devonta Smith, 2.9%. So even if you compare him to last year's class, he is still at the top of the class. My guy does not drop the catchable targets. And you see that on film. 2.1%. That is by far elite. No questions about it. So is there a reason to worry about his hand size? No, there's not. If we talk about his upside, if you truly wanted, if there was like one game I wanted you to watch to see his upside, go watch the 2020 Sugar Bowl to see his upside. Okay, 2020. Go watch the 2020 Sugar Bowl where Georgia played. I believe it was Baylor, if I'm not mistaken. And lastly, on George Pickens is my pro comp for him, which is AJ Green. On film, I think they both win in very similar ways. It actually reminds me a lot of watching AJ Green at Georgia those days. They can bully cornerbacks on their routes. They can win at the catch point. They're red zone threats, sure hands, true alpha dominating wide receivers. So I thought to myself, well, if that's my comp for him, because that was just my comp based off of film, let me look at their pro days. Let me look at their measurements. Do they line up at all here, okay? So I'm going to take you through AJ Green versus George Pickens, and maybe I will take a screenshot of this for you guys to see. All right, so height, they're both 6'3". Weight, AJ Green is 211, Pickens is 195. I mean, he's been weighed higher than that, so maybe he's at a low point right now and he can put more weight on. The 40-yard dash, AJ Green 4.48, George Pickens 4.47. The vertical jump, 34.5 inches versus 33 inches. But at his pro day, George Pickens' pro day, he actually did exactly what AJ Green did, 34.5 inches. Okay. Broad jump, AJ Green 126 inches, George Pickens 125. All right. Why don't we look statistically at their best years? Okay. Both only had one season at Georgia where they played 12 or more games. Both of those seasons were when they were freshmen. Okay. AJ was in 2008. And Pickens was in 2019. AJ played 13 games in that year. Pickens played 12 in 2019. Okay, so AJ does have one more game on him with these stats, but you can have a look at the screen right now. You can see how similar those years were for them. Okay, I don't need to go through it. Hopefully I have the screenshots up for you.
Right.
At the end of the day, George Pickens can have an AJ Green type career. That is a realistic possibility. I know it's not a certainty, because nothing is a certainty. I'm aware that George Pickens could bust because of the injury. I'm aware of that. Okay. However, in my dynasty drafts, what do I really want to bet on? I want to bet on a dominant alpha X wide receiver.
Right. Okay.
Now, are Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave probably safer bets? Do they have a much safer floor? Yes, I can't argue with that. But can they be, if all these players reach their upside, will they be more valuable than George Pickens? No, I don't think so. So George Pickens is someone that I have loved throughout this process, and I finally have come to the conclusion of him being my wide receiver 2 in this class.
Yeah, look, I'm not saying I disagree. I like George Pickens. He was always a guy. I don't know if I can put him ahead of the Garrett Wilsons, or I don't know who's your wide receiver one, but the Garrett Wilsons or the Chris Olaves.
Jameson Williams.
Jameson
Williams have been my wide receiver one since day one.
Yeah, so for me, I still have those other guys. I love George Pickens. He's in my top 5. So
Okay.
I believe in the talent. Everything you're saying is absolutely correct. So my player that has gone up for me, maybe it's a little bit surprising for you or for anyone, and that's Desmond Ridder. And I think that's pretty obvious in the fantasy community as well. He's a guy that's kind of been going off and raving during the combine and everything. So where he was before the whole right after the scouting process, before the NFL combine, was my QB6, and now he's my QB3. I've been keeping my cards a little bit close to my chest because I don't really want to give away my quarterbacks, because I do believe they are the most valuable, especially in the Superflex League. This is probably the first time the community is hearing it. And every single time we have done a Superflex mock draft, or rookie mock draft, excuse me, he has been going in the second round. Okay. And we just recently been doing some landing spots, and he's been falling in some really good spots. Okay. And my thought process is, if he really goes there, Desmond can be some tremendous value. He's a dual threat quarterback, in my opinion. He can use his legs. So let's start off of why his stock was being raised. The NFL Combine. He was the fastest quarterback amongst all quarterbacks there. He ran a 4.52. It was absolutely fantastic for him. And then you saw him doing the drills. He has some zip on that ball, and there was some questions about, does he have the arm strength? And you saw it with ease that he threw a ball then like 50, 60 yards. This is a completely different setting. I understand that. But
no one's really no one's defending that pass.
No one's defending that pass, and you're absolutely right, and that's okay. But can he throw that ball with ease down the field? That's an absolute yes. And there was questions just about his arm strength. So I think we can put that to the side. Okay, and not to mention what he's done in college, those video game numbers his senior year, 64% pass completions, over 3,300 yards. He threw 30 touchdowns. Mind you, only 8 interceptions. That is crazy. If he could just translate just a little bit of that, which if he did just a little bit of that in the NFL, that would be great, in my opinion. Okay, there's so much good. Obviously, there's good and there's bad. Okay, let's start with the bad. The question was, does he have that deep ball? He needs to be more accurate moving forward. And I think these are things that can be improved. He needs to be more consistent with throwing the ball and placing the ball in the right places for his wide receivers. But I do believe with the right coaching, with the right staff, with the right mindset, it's good. And let's not forget the good side about Desmond Ridder, okay? He's an amazing leader. He's poised. He's a guy. I'm telling you everything that you guys should already know, just reiterating and just trying to bring you some more confidence in Desmond. He's also he doesn't run out of the pocket. He's not a Josh Allen when he's going to be running so many yards. He's not, one of these Lamar Jacksons, but he can use his legs. He's going to use his legs in the league, and that will be a high upside and a factor, especially in a dynasty perspective. And once again, he has a great, I think he just throws a great ball. I do believe so. If he can clean up the accuracy, he can clean up the consistency, which we've seen that. And I know we always go back to Josh Allen. He's not Josh Allen, but someone that was absolutely terrible his first 2 years, and we saw that next step, and now he's QB1. We're taking him QB1. Not saying Desmond could be QB1, but we've seen progressions in NFL quarterbacks taking that next step. And now every single time when someone's inconsistent, everyone goes to Josh Allen. Why can't we do that here? He can be more consistent. He can improve. Once again, not comparing him to Josh Allen.
He's the outlier, though.
Yeah, he is the outlier. And that is the outlier, and that's okay. There's so many outliers in the NFL, and you hope that there's – NFL's all about numbers now, to kind of, I guess, counteract that. NFL's all about numbers. They're all about analytics, and I think if they can help the way they help Josh Allen, I think they can help anyone in the NFL. At least we hope. You hope they can help anyone in the NFL. Anyways, my next thought process is there's actually a lot of good landing spots for quarterbacks to land to with teams that are ready to compete and teams that I believe can project their, talent to the next level. Okay, so let's look at the teams, and these are teams that some teams he's met with and some teams he hasn't. But the Steelers, the Falcons, the Saints, the Lions, the Colts, and the Seahawks. Whether that's in the first round, the second round, All these teams have tremendous pieces around them. And yeah, some of them he might have to wait a year. Okay. But hypothetically, if he lands at the Steelers, who he has met with,
Mm-hmm.
we always say that doesn't matter who lands there. We believe that can be a great quarterback there. Okay, he's gonna have a tremendous talent. Same thing with the Falcons. You have Kyle Pitts. They say they get Garrett Wilson in the first. Then you get Desmond in the second. I think no matter where this guy lands, at least according to these teams that I listed, he is going to have a tremendous upside moving forward. And I think that's with any quarterback. But I'm really hoping is Desmond. Okay. And let's really think about where he can finish. Once he comes into the league, if he does get the opportunity to start year one, I think he can have some sort of a Mac Jones season, maybe in the top 20. He's not gonna have crazy stats, but he's gonna play decent. Okay, maybe throw 3,300 yards, maybe 3,500 yards, maybe 20 to 24 touchdowns. He'll throw a couple interceptions. He's gonna get in the league playing in a tough division. If he does go, I guess it doesn't really matter where he goes. He's just playing. He's in the league now. But then he has a rushing upside of 200 yards, 200 plus yards, which I think he can finish in the top 20 of quarterbacks. I don't see why not take a shot at Desmond, especially in the second round. Where he's going right now for us is the second round.
Yeah.
If he lands in the Steelers, I do believe he goes in the first. Maybe it's a little bit harder. But I think the upside, the upside is there for Desmond. I think you guys should keep an eye on him. This is somebody that I am, once again, holding close to my chest. I'm saying, you know what? I really hope Desmond falls in a good spot and falls to me in the second or at the end of the first. Take a look at Desmond.
Yeah. With Desmond, I'm not more confident in him than anyone else. And I get where you're coming from. I'm happy to take a shot on him.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe a better career trajectory to look at to compare him to of what he would need to do in the NFL is Dak Prescott more than it is Josh Allen. Because he doesn't have the raw talent that Josh Allen does. Like if he becomes his ceiling, that's Dak Prescott. You know what I mean? It's not really Josh Allen, but I still think that's a very valuable quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah.
Landing spot will be huge. I think I've just come to the place where I'm like, outside of Malik, I don't even think he can.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think he's a lock.
Exactly,
I just don't care who I get. Like, if I'm at the 201 in a rookie draft, I'm like, whoever's there, sure. I don't feel more confident in anyone over the other.
And I think that's what I wanted to say is like I feel more confident in Desmond moving forward compared to a Sam Howell or a Matt Corral. I think Desmond Ridder feels more safe to where I believe his talent will take him further more than a Sam Howell and a Matt Corral. I do believe they are talented. I do believe they could be somewhat of fantasy relevant, but I think it will probably be like a 1-year thing. Maybe they get drafted in the second or third round. When I say them, I mean Sam Howell, Matt Corral. And I think it will be easy for the team to make a move. It's like, you know what? We just don't want to ride with this guy. But I think Desmond has the ability to play and to improve every single year and then become, like you said, maybe the Dak Prescott if he can be. But it might have to be a waiting game with Desmond. So that's another FYI. You might have to wait depending on the team he goes to, especially if he goes to the Colts. Maybe that's the best thing to do. Sit on Desmond and believe in the upside.
All right. My player that has gone down in my rankings, okay, a player that I was higher on last month than I am this month and maybe the month before, is Jalen Wydermyer. I used to love saying his name, but I don't even know if we're going to hear his name in the NFL draft. All right, he was my tight end 2 when we originally looked at the tight end class. To clarify, I said in that moment, no one outside of Trey McBride is really worth taking a shot on in rookie drafts. And I think I still stand by that outside of maybe Jelani Woods and some of these other underground names. But at this point, Jalen Wydermyer is very much in the don't draft category. So I don't really even have him ranked because I just am not going to draft Jalen Wydermyer. It's not going to happen. I will have no stock of Jalen Wydermyer. It doesn't matter if it's in the third. It doesn't matter if it's in the fourth. I will take shots on other players. And maybe draft capital will change that, but if he gets drafted higher than what I think he will, I mean, he had an abysmal pro day and a combine. It was truly abysmal. Maybe outside of Kyron Williams, he hurt his stock more than anyone with his pro day and his measurements and how he tested. He didn't run the 40 at the combine, and originally that was confusing, but it makes a lot of sense because he would have been absolutely embarrassed. And it's unfortunate, but he just doesn't have that speed. He did run the 40 at his pro day, and he ran a 5:03 40. Now, if we compare that to the 12 tight ends that did their 40,
I think I can run faster than that.
No, you definitely can't. If we compare that to the 12 tight ends who did their 40 at the combine, he would have been 13th. He would have been absolute last. Okay. So he didn't help himself at his pro day, didn't help himself at his combine, didn't test really well in any of those individual drills. And then I go back to, well, I project him to have a very limited use in the NFL. Yeah. He is not athletic enough. He's not quick enough to fit this hybrid tight end role that we keep placing him in. And he's not a very good run blocker, not a very good pass blocker. Pretty weak in his upper body when you compare him to the rest of the tight ends. So you can't really put him on the line. I don't think he has enough strength to really help. He's more of a weakness if you put him there than he is a strength for you. He lacks burst, inconsistent hands. Think about this. As a tight end, normally your advantage is that you can outrun linebackers, and you have an advantage there. You have a disadvantage for the defense.
Right.
My guy's running a 5:03. Most linebackers in the NFL are faster than that. So he doesn't really even have that advantage. So it comes down to, I mean, how many snaps can Wydermyer really get? And as a tight end, I feel like his role is going to be extremely limited in the NFL. Maybe he is a red zone guy only. Because does it make sense to put him in run plays? Not really, because he's not a good run blocker. Does it make sense to use him as a distraction on the field? Well, no, because he doesn't have the speed to be a distraction. So At the end of the day, like, how many snaps is he really going to see? Is this a player that's going to see around 30 to 40% snaps every game? And that's not someone that is ever going to be fantasy relevant. So also, you have to look at draft capital. I mean, according to mock draft database, which this isn't everything at all these mock drafts are not going to be accurate, but it's a good resource. In January, he was actually a lock for the second round. Now it's considered that he might be a 5th round pick, but there's also reports that maybe he's not even drafted. So some teams have just completely moved him off their board.
Yeah.
I mean, they might look at a Jelani Woods or someone who has maybe less of an entirety of a career, but more intriguing as a prospect. So with this many red flags, I personally have just completely moved him off my board. I'll let someone else draft him. I don't have any interest in any tight end in this draft outside of Trey McBride. And maybe that will change because, you know, I have my sleepers like my Cole Turners, but no one's talking about that. But if he gets good draft capital and if he lands where I want him to, then maybe I'll look at some other tight ends depending on landing spots. But right now, I'm not interested in. There's no tight end that I really see becoming super fantasy relevant outside of Trey McBride.
Yeah, I can definitely see it's tough. It's gonna be hard to see with these guys, especially the players that have gone down. Which I'll tell you, my player that's gone down, and that's David Bell. And I think the whole fantasy community, everyone, just everywhere, is saying David Bell is falling, and he keeps falling. He was originally my wide receiver 3 after scouting him, to be completely honest. He was my wide receiver 3. I thought he was extremely talented. I thought he can be the next Allen Robinson, a guy that can get the workload. Then the NFL Combine came, and then he dropped down to my wide receiver 6. Why? Because
so he's still your 6, so you still believe in him.
Because he dropped down again, which was probably.
Oh, that was after the Combine.
That was after the Combine, correct. So after the Combine, you know, he had the 4th worst 40 amongst wide receivers. He ran a 4.65. He didn't look good at all, to be completely honest. There was no confidence. He looked deflated. It didn't look like he wanted to be there. Maybe because the 40 time just wasn't good. Okay, now with everything
game at some point,
with everything that's happening and all these mock drafts and more research into all these players, he's dropped down again. Now after doing this video and really going through every single player in my rankings, he's my wide receiver 10. Okay, and once again, this is all through the process of the Combine. I was hoping he would be a little bit faster through the process of the mental mistakes that he was having in the Combine. He didn't catch everything, and look. and not saying that. Look, there's a lot of pressure in the combine for sure, and I don't want to put too much weight on the combine. But I think the people that have outshined him really bumped up their draft capital, because when we were coming in with David Bell, we were saying this guy can be at the end of the first round, early second. Now, kind of like you, combine, I looked at mock draft database. He's projected mid to late third. So now my thought process
would be a surprise to me I guess it wouldn't surprise me if he went there, but also I'm like, man, his draft capital could even get worse.
Exactly. And I think, once again, as much as I believe in David Bell, and how much I believe he could be the next Allen Robinson, he has a similar build. Allen Robinson ran, I think, the same 40, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And this is going to be based on draft capital and where he's going to go. Sure. He can just go to another team. He's going to fall through the rankings. The last team that he got drafted to was in our rookie mock draft with landing spots was to the Bucks, and he's behind Chris Godwin, Mike Evans. But the plus side is that he has Tom Brady. But if he lands somewhere, if he lands anywhere else, I just feel like he's not someone that I want to look at anymore. It's not somebody that I want to invest in. I'd rather go with somebody else that maybe have to sit back a year. This is just a guy that I used to love, that it hurts my heart saying it, because I keep saying I do believe he's talented, but it's all going to be based on draft capital and where he goes, to see if he can really live up to the hype that he got in the beginning of the offseason. And I don't know if that's going to be the case anymore for David Bell.
Yeah, I get that. To be honest, for me, the reason he's moved down, because I think he was my wide receiver 8, and now he's my 11.
Mm-hmm.
He could be my 12. I'd have to double check, but for me, it was just the confidence all around, because Allen Robinson didn't run a very good 40 time, but he looked confident at the combine, and he performed well in other drills. And David Bell also, like, his capital is definitely falling. Allen Robinson was a first round pick. There's no way David Bell is going to be a first round pick. So anyone out there who's like Allen Robinson truther with that comp, he can still be that kind of player, but I don't know if he has that upside in the NFL. We'll see.
Yeah.
But those are a current rankings update. Let us know what you think. Do you agree with some of these? Do you disagree with some of these? You can comment below. You can tell us how we're idiots. It's all goods. All goods in the hoods. Who says that?
Yo, what's good? Thanks for watching. We got a lot more videos.
A lot more.
If you want more videos.
Watch it.
You can also subscribe.
Right now.
If you want to.
You need to.
And lastly, don't forget that you can sign up to support the show and get exclusive content by going to patreon.com/fantasylandfam.